we've got 1,000 rings. Huzzah! Finally, the factory have managed to release 1,000 rings that match our exacting standards for QA. We were due 5,000, and it is extremely upsetting that we've not had 5,000 rings because they were extremely late anyway. But the QA failure was a disaster. It really was. But the interesting thing, and this is kind of my takeaway from this, and there's no particularly good news. There's actually, I'll cover the story, basically what happened. So I had to have a 2.5-hour conversation with the factory on Friday, 3 days ago. This is Sunday, 2 days ago. And it was a really painful conversation, trying to get the facts of what happened and pull it out of them. And basically what happened was, and there's a takeaway for a lot of people probably who are thinking about doing business in China maybe from this. There's a few takeaways, and I'm going to cover them all. So the conversation went along the lines of, look, they said to us, look, we're really sorry, you're not going to get all 5,000 rings. I'm like, okay, well, as long as it's at least 2,000, that'll give us the ability to set up 1,000 in the US, 1,000 in the UK. We get set up with all of our shipping, that's fine. I was just, because we took into account we have extra rings that aren't Kickstarter rings that you're going to use for pre-orders, right? So we've ordered extra anyway. So they say, we're really sorry, but they failed on your QA process. So we have, as you know, it's fully documented online. We expect, we have a high level of expectation for our QA, for how the rings look, how they perform, and they failed on a very specific thing. So we sent out our QA testers about a week before all of the clear glue went on. So they did 500 rings went through QA and passed with a failure rate of about 4 or 5%, which is still high, bearing in mind the cost to us, but it's tolerable, right? We're able to say, well, 4 or 5%, they go back into manufacturing, blah, blah, blah. So the actual failure rate that happened in the factory was 80%. 5,000 were produced, 4,000 had to be scrapped, which is, it cost us a fortune as well. It's cost us about $10,000, right? Which we can't see back. They've essentially damaged our goods. And so I said to him, well, what's gone wrong? How did you have such a high QA failure rate? And he said, well, firstly, it was cold. So the clear epoxy, like the glue through the top clear coat that we use, didn't set hard enough. I'm like, well, why didn't you just use some sort of UV lamps or whatever? Surely you're familiar with that problem, you do that process all the time. He says, yeah, we do this process all the time. I'm like, right. He says, yeah, it was an oversight by the workers. And I said, well, you're the manager of the factory. You sort out with the workers. And he says, yeah, I tried to, but nobody wants to work this time of year. And I'm like, what do you mean nobody wants to work this time of year? You're gearing up to go on holiday. Surely you want to get everything done, get it out, and then you can enjoy a holiday. And his essentially what he said is that, I should probably do a little kind of talking piece between somebody else, because the conversation blew my mind. I guess this is maybe a cultural difference, right? He basically said that in January, as they're gearing up to Chinese New Year, or the 3 weeks before Chinese New Year, the quality of the work that comes from China in general drops significantly low. So we have a lot of the work that goes into the ring is manual labour, the assembly, the clear glue, all of the parts. So it's all done, by hand. We don't have robots to do these because we're not at that scale yet. We'd love to be at that point, because obviously then we can ensure quality. But at the moment we're at the mercy of humans, which I try to have a lot of faith in the processes and everything. So the conversation goes, well, if I'm going to give you these rings to make, and I need them all year round, like production, however many thousand a month, you're telling me that 1 in every 12 months, at least, and this is like a month before Chinese New Year, and then during Chinese New Year I get nothing as well, so 2 out of 10 months, really a year, the quality is going to drop, and the production is going to drop. And he's like, yeah. And I just, to me, I like I say, this is a cultural difference, right? Or this is what the factory is saying, and this is, there's a limit to my patience. I pride myself on being a patient person. I tolerate a certain degree of failure. But when somebody says that 2 out of 12 months, so a sixth of all of our funds, essentially, could potentially be risked and damaged, and we don't have any repercussion on that, like they're damaging our stock, essentially, there's no way I can tolerate that long term. So, yeah, my options are very limited. Obviously, it looks like manufacturing in China of a high quality product may not be for us. Now, I'm not saying there are no factories in China that can do this. It may just be the mentality of the workers in the province that we, or the local area that we are getting the rings made. And we did have multiple factories lined up, but the reason we chose this factory, I mean, my background is in IT, so I do high availability for everything, but the reason we chose this factory was because they worked so closely with us in developing the ring, getting it through to a point where, you know, it came along leaps and bounds in the time that we were working with them, and they really do fully understand the process and what we're trying to achieve and what the ring's good for, and you know, all of these important things. So we made a commitment to them because they invested quite a lot of their time and their skills and knowledge into helping us improve the ring. However, maybe in hindsight, the mistake that I made was not keeping another factory on board, because obviously all of our spec sheets are open source and public domain. I mean, we could have just kept another factory outside of China, which this is probably what I regret the most, is I put all of my eggs in one basket with this factory. And now I don't want to move away from this factory, don't get me wrong. I still think that because the interesting thing is that they failed them on QA. It wasn't our guys that went and failed them on QA. They looked at the rings and they said, look, these are not going to be good enough for John. To me, that speaks volumes, because they know that we have high standards. And, you know, they've said to us quite a few times, they're not used to working to spec sheets, to, you know, to us measuring everything, to us testing everything. And that speaks volumes. I guess in some ways that's complimentary, but it doesn't help getting the rings out to you guys when they're damaging 4 out of every 5 rings they produce. So, I mean, lots of grovelling by the factory on Friday. Like I said, it was a 2.5 hour conversation. It was really, really painful, because they thought that I was really angry at them, but I just wanted to get to the facts, and I was just being as stern as possible. I was trying to find out a chronological order of how these events unfolded and how we can stop them happening again in the future, which is like the main thing. They messed up on the clear glue. The people that were responsible for that, I assume there's been repercussions, and they said that there's been repercussions. I wasn't there, so I can't give any confirmation of that. But I think the main thing is that when we fail and then we iterate, we change our process and we improve. So there's a few steps I'm going to make. Obviously, I'm speaking with other factories like I have been previously anyway, and I'm going to get those guys on board during the Chinese New Year. It's going to cost me quite a bit of money to do this. Again, money is just money. The company as it stands is essentially committed 100% to getting the NFC ring in its highest absolute quality at the lowest possible price to the world. Essentially, we have some challenges, such as there's been a couple of companies that have released really, really, really poor quality rings at a lower price point than what we'd be comfortable performing at. So essentially they're putting out steel rings. You know, like the first ring we were going to put out was steel, and then our community said, no, we want titanium, and you guys were right for that. But they're willing to put out much cheaper items, and we're just not really comfortable with that, and we don't really want to be taking part in a race to the bottom. So we have to deal with that challenge, and the only way that we can really deal with that challenge is through marketing and explaining to consumers why a higher quality ring is better, and that means more capital, right? The only way we can do that is through capital. Now, thankfully, I'm in an extremely lucky position, and again, I think I've said this before in an update. If I wasn't in such an extremely fortunate position where I've had a background in tech businesses for a while, I just think that this Kickstarter campaign or the whole process we'd have been through would have been so much more difficult. I'm lucky because I can, if we start running low on funds in the McClear Limited bank account, I can invest some more of my personal finance into the company to ensure that we don't have to make compromises on quality, and so that we don't join this race to the bottom, because we don't want to be that company. But I just feel like it must just be so difficult for completely new Kickstarter projects that get into the position we're in now, where we're really late on shipping. Our factory's costing us a fortune. We're now potentially looking to have to compete with a company that's basically not ripping off, because we don't want to disencourage, if that's a word, copiers. But yeah, so we're at a point now where all these things are happening, and yeah. So anyway, that's totally went off point. Anyway, the main thing is that the reason that 4,000 rings didn't get delivered out of the 5,000 was that they failed QA, and the takeaway is that at least China are doing some of their own internal QA, and they didn't send us 4,000 rings, which would have gone faulty within a week or a month or whatever. Which is, there's some positives, there's a lot of negatives, but there's, we're looking forward at least instead of looking backwards. So that's phase 1, right? The rest of the phase 1 rings will come with phase 2 now, which as I've mentioned on the overview update is due mid-March. Now we can't make that come any quicker, right? Because Chinese New Year's now started. They come back on February the 10th. There's no way we can. I mean, the only other thing we could do would be to get another factory set up. But even then, we wouldn't have we don't keep the inlays in the UK. We keep them in China. So we wouldn't be able to get them out to another factory. So there's no way we can rush that forward. It's impossible. Basically, it's 8-week lead time on the inlays anyway. So yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll get other factories on board to avoid this kind of level of failure in the future, and just to increase resiliency. But yeah, just sit tight for mid-March, which is like March the 14th. It was when 14,000, so all of the rest of phase 1 and all of phase 2, so it's about 14,000 rings, will be due. The other positive, of course, from that is that we'll get these 1,000 rings out, and we'll get user feedback, so real world people using them, telling us about their experience, suggesting how we can improve them. I mean, we've already, as you know, done lots of app improvements, such as the app showing where the sweet spot is, and we're constantly improving all that. So yeah, we'd like things to be moving quicker, but we always knew Chinese New Year was going to be a kind of gotcha. But the other good news is that I did say in one of my previous updates that we were really panicky that the rings would get stuck in China over New Year. They got out quite a bit before. It only took them 3 or 4 days to get through Hong Kong and out to Heathrow. I don't know whether they've cleared customs yet. I'll probably find out more tomorrow. So yeah, this is a bit of a long-winded update, and a bit of a long-winded way of saying we're sorry that the 4,000 rings have failed QA, but we'd have been more sorry if we'd have received those rings and then had to send them back to China, or send them back, and potentially China charging us for something. So there's some positives, there's some negatives, as is always the case, and I just do my best to keep you all up to date on the production. But there's basically going to be no news on production now until February the 10th. So expect the production updates to go quiet, but expect us to be updating you more about the apps and shipping and documentation, packaging, all this kind of stuff. So thanks very much for watching, and I will see you soon.